Hello everybody, it's me, Mr. Tall23, back in their video, another learning French video. Again, if you don't want me to do this series, if you want me to stop, say something in the comment section, because I'm not gonna do anything if you don't say anything. So, last time we went over the basic vocabulary in the French language, things like garçon, chien, oui, non, things like that. Today, as I promised, I'm going to be discussing important phrases, and some of these are even some words which I discussed in the last video. Important phrases in French. So once again, I have this drawing. Maybe if I turn this light off, you can. There's not a glare on the paper. So, but then again, it's it's not that hard to see. Just the light. Okay, whatever. But right here I have 23 phrases, and that is a coincidence actually, Mr. Tall 23. I just wrote down a list of things and decided that this should suffice for this video. I don't want to do too much because that'll make the video much longer than it needs to be, although then again 10, 15, 20-minute videos aren't going to be sufficient for learning the French language. So I suggest that you study on your own. Like I said, I recommend the app Duolingo. The lesson plan for that kind of goes along with this, although it's a little bit different. Obviously, it starts out with the basic things. There's no alphabet or accent thing like that, but it starts off with the basics, just like I'm starting off with the basics. And then it gets progressively harder, but then there's a bunch of random topics thrown throughout there. So the first one is something that I did talk about in the last video. It's bonjour. I'm gonna try to position this. Bonjour. That just means how. And I didn't write the definition next to it, so I'll just tell you the definition. Bonjour means hello. It literally means good day. Okay, bon means good, and jour means day. But it is the most common greeting you would use in French. If you meet somebody, you say bonjour. And the next one's another one I talked about, but in parentheses I have another addition to it, another word as well. But it's merci, that means thank you, but you could also say merci beaucoup, which means thank you very much. So beaucoup means very much, a lot, things like that. Thank you a lot. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. The next one, another one I talked about, is au revoir. That means goodbye. It doesn't actually literally mean goodbye, but it's something you say when you're leaving. When you're leaving somebody, you'd say au revoir. That's one thing you could say. The next one is important, and some of these are very practical for somebody who's like, if I'm teaching you French, so you don't have to speak French, basically. For the people who don't really speak French, but who want some basic knowledge of some basic phrases. So maybe if you go to France or Quebec or some French-speaking country in the future, some francophone country, and somebody says something to you in French, you can say things like "Je ne comprends pas," or something like that, and some of these other ones which I'm going to talk about to give them the hint that you don't speak their language. Because if they don't speak English and you start speaking in English, they're going to just scratch their head. But if you know at least the phrases, things like "Je ne comprends pas," which is the next one, that means I do not understand. And this is that's how you conjugate it. Remember, and I'm going to go back to some of the lessons from before, but also talk about some of the lessons in the future. That's how you would conjugate comprendre, which is an RE verb. So remember, because it's je, since it's first person singular, you just remove the RE and then you add an S on the end. So comprendre, you don't pronounce the S. Je ne comprends pas. And then the ne pas, it's called, some people might call it the ne pas sandwich. That's how you negate things. You'd put the ne before the verb and then the pas after the verb. And of course, I'll talk about that in a later video, going more in depth about negation, but that's just a basic example. It means I do not understand. Comprendre means understand. The next one is s'il vous plaît. S'il vous plaît, right here, the first word, si, is actually a contraction And you would do that because in the French language you have to put the apostrophe when there's a vowel at the end of the word and a vowel at the beginning of the next word. S'il vous plaît basically just means please. So you'd say, can I have this, s'il vous plaît? Obviously that wasn't in French, but s'il vous plaît means please. So merci is thank you, s'il vous plaît is please, but it literally translates as if it pleases you, because this is a contraction of si and il. Si means if. Il could be he or it. So if it, and then vous, you, play, pleases. If it pleases you. That's technically what it means, but it's the English, or the equivalent to the English phrase please. The next one is je ne sais pas, which just means I don't know. Again, you have another negation. Say is the conjugation of savoir, which is one of the two words you'd use for to know. So the other one is connaître, but one of them is savoir. It's je sais or je ne sais pas. It's what you'd say if you don't know something. The next one, je m'en fiche. That just basically means I don't care. And this is where something very complicated will come in, or it's not very complicated, but it's kind of a more advanced level thing that you don't really learn in first year or first younger level French classes or lessons or whatever. It's about on right there. See, it says je m'en fiche, that en, and then there's also e, like in il y a, j'y vais, and which means I go there. And I'll talk about that again in a later video, but that's just something that you have to look out for. It just means I don't care, basically. Je ne parle pas français. Again, if you watch one of the last videos about some of the examples of the ER verbs, I think parler was my example. This is how you conjugate it. So it'd be je ne parle pas français. I do not speak French. And then, of course, after that, you'd have je parle français, which means I do speak French. I speak French. So if somebody says something to you in French, you could say je ne parle pas français if you don't know French. But if you do, if they see that you're a foreigner, or they know that you're a foreigner, you could say, no, non, je parle français, and then you can continue talking in French. The next one is a question. Comment ça va? That means, it really translated, it's how is it going? Remember, va is the conjugation for aller, which means to go. And then ça just basically means it or this or something like that. So comment ça va? That's a question to ask for how's it going? How are you doing? Something like that. Ça va is the response. One of the responses you could have to that is just it's going. You could just say ça va. That just means it's just ordinary, I'm fine, something like that. Now to the next group of, I have to kind of fold this up a little bit. Not fold it up too much though. Okay, the next one is ça va bien. That means, again, it is going well. So bien means well. And then another response, if it's going bad, would be ça va mal. Mal means bad, and you can see that in English with words like malnutrition, malevolent, things like that. The prefix mal basically means bad, because if you don't know much about the history of the English language, or history of England in general, the Normans were a group of people that lived in the area of Normandy in France is named after the Normans. They invaded England in 1066, and they gradually replaced the language of Old English, which is basically just Anglo-Saxon, with is kind of a combination of Old English, Anglo-Saxon language, and also the language of the French. So French comes from Latin, so you have a lot of Latin words and Latin phrases and prefixes, suffixes, things like that thrown into English. And that's why a lot of the words in French will actually look similar and sound similar to some of the words you'll see in English. But like general words, general things you'd say are different because, again, English has its ultimate origin in Anglo-Saxon. So that's a little history lesson as well. That's how the English language came to be. So it's very, French has influenced English very much. So if you know English, French will be kind of hard. It's like, I would say, a level 1 kind of thing. If you're going to learn a language, and English is your native language, I'd recommend speaking a language which has similarities to English in some way, like German. I've heard that Dutch is very similar, French, Spanish, Italian, things like that. And I don't recommend that you start off with like Hebrew or Greek or Japanese or Chinese or Hindi or anything like that. So anyway, that's getting off topic. So très bien, I think I mentioned that in the last video. That means very well. Okay, so très means very. And you say that whenever something is very well. Très bien. The next one is another question, and then I also have the reply to the question. It's comment tu t'appelles? And that means that you would say that it would normally be translated as what is your name, but the technical translation, the literal translation, would be how are you called? Yes, how are you called? Because t'appelles or appel, that verb, because of appeler, that means to call. Okay, so it's how are you called? What are you called? So that's what you're asking, but it basically means what is your name? And then you respond with je m'appelle, so I am called, je m'appelle, and these are reflexive verbs. I'll talk about that in a different video again, or yeah, reflexive verbs, I think that's what they're called. That's not like a thing with learning French. It's a grammatical term, so I mean, you can learn a language without knowing all the weird phrases for grammatical terms. I mean, you can know what an infinitive is without knowing what the word infinitive means and things like that. But I believe it's a reflexive verb. I haven't heard it in a long time, but I know it is though. So je m'appelle. That means I am called, and then the dots would be where your name is. So if I'm introducing myself, or somebody asks me comment tu t'appelles, I'd say, and by the way, you'd change it if it was formal, and I'll go into that in a different video. Tu is both singular, but it's also for informal people. So you'd use vous, which is plural, even for a singular person if it's formal, if it's your teacher or your older relative or something like that. But I would say je m'appelle Alex. I am called Alex. The next question or phrase is quel âge as-tu? I noticed the circumflex over the A, so that was irrelevant. But make sure when you're writing it, it has a circumflex over there. So quel âge as-tu? It basically would translate as how old are you, or what age are you, but it technically means, as you can tell by as-tu, it technically means what age have you, or what age do you have, because tu as is the conjugation for avoir. So the next one is j'ai, and then this is the response to quel âge as-tu. J'ai, I have, and then whatever number, how old you are. And again, I'll talk about numbers in a different video. I'm 16, so I would say j'ai 16 ans. J'ai 16 ans, that's where I'd put between the j'ai. So I have 16 years. An means years. And that's where words like anniversary come from. And if you know anything about Latin, like AD, Anno Mundi, year of the, or not, Anno Mundi means something else. What was it? Anno Domini. Okay, Anno Mundi means day of the, or year of the world. That's year after creation or something. Yeah, year of the world. Anno Domini in Latin means year of the Lord, and that refers to AD. Anno, again, Latin is the origin of French, so that's where an comes from. So that's one way you can remember it if you know anything about Latin or anything like that. Words like anniversary, as I mentioned before. So I have 16 years. J'ai 16 ans. The next question is just combien, just one word. It means how much. The next one is actually just a word again. It's ici. It just means hair. So where? Où? Ici. Ici means hair. The next one is Parlez-vous anglais? And this is another question which could be useful for somebody who speaks French and you don't know French that well, and you need to ask them, Parlez-vous anglais, to ask them if they know how to speak English, because that's what it means. And we'll talk about question types, or I'll talk about question types in a later video. This, I believe, is called inverse. Is where you rearrange it so it's really just arranging. You have the verb before the subject pronoun, and then so it's parlez-vous anglais. You don't just say vous parlez anglais. That would just mean you speak English. It's parlez-vous anglais? Do you speak English? Without a word for do actually being there. So the next phrase is où est, and that is where is. So it could be a question. So where is whatever? Where is the library? That would be où est la bibliothèque? And the final phrase I'm going to talk about today is excusez-moi. Excusez-moi. That means excuse me. It even sounds like the English phrase, so that could be easy to remember. So these are important phrases that you might need to use. Just to go over them real quick again, without showing you the paper. Try to remember what they are. I'll go through all of them. Maybe just as like a practice, you can try and say whatever you think it is, or if you remember it, what it is, and then I'll go over what it is afterwards. So, bonjour, merci, au revoir, je ne comprends pas, s'il vous plaît, je ne sais pas, je m'en fiche, je ne parle pas français, je parle français, comment ça va, ça va bien, ça va mal, très bien, comment tu t'appelles, je m'appelle, quel âge as-tu, j'ai 16 ans, combien, ici, parlez-vous anglais, où est, and excusez-moi. So those mean, okay, going in order, bonjour means hello, merci, thank you, or merci beaucoup, thank you very much, au revoir, goodbye, je ne comprends pas, I do not understand, s'il vous plaît, please, or if it pleases you, je ne sais pas, I don't know, I know what it means, but je ne sais pas means I don't know. Je m'en fiche, I don't care. Je ne parle pas français, I don't speak French. Je parle français, I speak French. Comment ça va? How are you going? Ça va, it is going. Or how is it going? For comment ça va. And then ça va would be it's going. Ça va bien, it's going well. Ça va mal, it's going bad. Très bien, very well. Comment tu t'appelles? What are you called, or how are you called? What is your name? Je m'appelle, I am called. Quel âge as-tu? What age are you, or what age do you have? J'ai 16 ans, I filled in says there. You would put whatever number it is. So if you're 20 years old, you'd say j'ai 20 ans. And again, I'll go into numbers later. If you're, I don't know, 13 years old, you'd say j'ai 13 ans. When I first started speaking French, it was j'ai 14 ans, and I said that for quite some time because I started learning like 2 months after my 14th birthday, I believe. So the next one is combien, just means how much. Ici, here. Parlez-vous anglais? Do you speak English? Où est? Where is? And then you'd say whatever you're asking about. And then excusez-moi, which means excuse me. So thank you already for watching. I hope this was a useful video, useful French lesson or whatever. If you have any questions, of course, you can always ask. So thank you and goodbye.